Stephen King has always worn his love for horror proudly, often taking to interviews, essays, and social media to recommend the films that truly get under his skin. From Sam Raimi's The Evil Dead to the recent Late Night with the Devil, the legendary author has proven time and again that he knows a great scare when he sees one. Among his recurring favorites, however, is a chilling supernatural classic that deserves far more recognition: Peter Medic's The Changeling, 1980. Although The Changeling was somewhat eclipsed by flashier releases like Poltergeist, it stands as one of the most important and eerily timeless ghost stories ever put to film. Its influence on the horror genre, particularly in the modern era of grief horror, cannot be overstated. Medic's film set a standard for emotional storytelling within horror, one that many have imitated but few have matched. A haunting tale rooted in grief and mystery. The Changeling tells the story of John Russell, a classical composer, played masterfully by George C. Scott, who retreats to a sprawling mansion after the sudden deaths of his wife and daughter. What begins as an attempt at healing soon spirals into something darker when John realizes the house is haunted by the restless spirit of a murdered child. Rather than relying on spectacle or gore, The Changeling builds its horror through atmosphere and emotion. Every creaking door, echoing hallway, and ghostly whisper serves a purpose. The film unfolds as both a supernatural mystery and a portrait of a man crippled by loss. Medic's direction turns John's investigation into an almost spiritual journey, one that explores the fine line between obsession and redemption. The film's screenplay, written by William Gray and Diana Maddox, is both restrained and profound. It offers twists and revelations without ever sacrificing tone or character depth. Viewers are left not only frightened by what they've seen, but moved by the quiet tragedy that drives it. Stephen King's endorsement, and why it still matters. For an author who's terrified millions, Stephen King's own fears are revealing. In essays for the British Film Institute and numerous interviews, King has singled out The Changeling as one of the few films that genuinely unsettled him. He wrote, "For supernatural horror, I like Peter Medic's film The Changeling, starring George C. Scott in perhaps his last great screen role. There are no monsters bursting from chests. Just a child's ball bouncing down a flight of stairs was enough to scare the daylights out of me." That single image, a ball bouncing down a staircase, encapsulates the film's genius. It's not the apparition that terrifies us, but what it represents: memory, guilt, and unresolved sorrow. Like much of King's own writing, The Changeling understands that grief is its own form of haunting. The birth of grief horror. Decades before Hereditary, The Babadook, or Midsommar redefined horror through trauma, The Changeling laid the groundwork. It fused emotional storytelling with supernatural fear, showing that ghosts can symbolize more than death. They can embody pain itself. Modern filmmakers have followed its example by turning grief into a literal haunting. Yet, few have achieved The Changeling's delicate balance between sorrow and suspense. The film's emotional weight never overshadows its scares. Instead, it deepens them. What also sets it apart is its refusal to pretend to be anything other than a horror movie. While Rosemary's Baby and The Exorcist were praised for transcending the genre, The Changeling embraced horror fully and elevated it in the process. The Changeling's shadow over Stephen King's own work. King's affection for The Changeling is more than admiration, it's inspiration. His novel Bag of Bones mirrors many of the same themes: a widowed writer, a haunted house, and the unearthing of buried secrets. Both protagonists channel their grief into obsession, and both find purpose through confronting the supernatural. Similarly, stories like 1408 and The Shining echo The Changeling's DNA. Each centers on an isolated man confronting a haunted space that mirrors his internal decay. The setting itself becomes a character, a manifestation of memory, madness, and guilt. King may have expanded these themes in his own way, but Medic's film arguably defined the emotional language of modern horror first. A timeless ghost story that still chills. More than 4 decades later, The Changeling remains one of the most quietly devastating horror films ever made. It's not the jump scares that linger, but the atmosphere, the sense of melancholy that hangs in every frame. Its restraint makes it timeless, and its emotional depth ensures it never feels dated. It's easy to see why Stephen King, Martin Scorsese, and Guillermo del Toro all hold it in such high regard. The Changeling reminds audiences that true horror doesn't need spectacle, it just needs truth, and a story that cuts to the bone. For anyone who's never seen it, The Changeling isn't just a ghost story, it's a mirror held up to loss itself. 45 years later, it's still one of the scariest movies ever made, precisely because its horrors are all too human.